Welcome to Strip Cover Look, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort.
And I'm Dalton Gentry.
And we are here for part 5 of a 6-part series as we meander along the wonderful tale that is A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. Chapter 5, Dalton, Salty, what do we got?
Wonderful tale, my ass. This is terrible.
It's not terrible.
It's terrible. Okay, so, Chapter 5.
Especially this chapter. How can you say that Chapter 5 is terrible?
There's been worse chapters.
Okay.
We begin in the Daedalus home, where we are reminded of financial hardships of the family again. Hard times. Stephen is now in university and is constantly questioning art. The idea of art now. The idea of beauty. Aesthetic beauty. What is beauty? We get to argue a lot with a lot of different friends. We start to talk a little bit of politics, which, to be honest, I don't know a lot about historic Irish politics, so this is lost on me. My fault. But we can assume at this point that this political movement that happened has had an effect on his family, because he is very against it. Stephen has started writing again, and has decided to leave Ireland. And we're left with a few journal entries as he departs. That's it.
Okay. That's fine.
You're just like, open a can of soda and you're really excited, you take a sip, and you're like, oh, it's so good, and then you forget about it, and you take a drink, like, well, that's fucking flat. Maybe it fizzled out a little bit.
No, Dalton, you have the worst memory known to man. So, I have not had that happen.
It ain't good.
It ain't good?
It ain't good? Okay, so.
When was the last time that you wrote a classic novel that took place during a religious revolution and it ended up with a guy probably being atheist?
Okay.
And it's known as one of the greatest novels of all time.
That's what gets me here. It's not horrible. It's decent. There's a lot going on. I think
am excited to see what your grade will be next week.
It ain't good.
I will be excited to see what your grade is next week.
There is a lot going on here. There's a lot that can be analyzed. The writing is damn good.
Maybe we should go straight into Ulysses from here.
Shut up. But it's not top 5. Every time you look at, the top 5 greatest books of all time, you will always see Portrait of the Artist somewhere up there.
Maybe not top 5. If you've
10.
got a top 100 list, it's definitely making the list.
It's always top 100.
Ulysses is the one that they normally say is the greatest novel
because
of all
no one
time.
knows what it's about.
Right. And you don't want to look stupid, so you just say Ulysses is the best.
But maybe I read this at the wrong time. Maybe I didn't give it what I needed to give it, but I wasn't crazy
Got a little
about
taste here of
Harry Potter flair. That's fine. That's fine. So, what do we want to talk about this week? We're going to try to save this for some review next week, so it's just a spoiler, taste of what's coming. What are we talking about in these chapters?
Very early in the chapter, we get a scene of the dean trying to pry an answer out of Stephen about joining the clergy. Do you remember what he was doing in that scene?
Was he stoking a fire?
Yeah, he sure was, wasn't he?
Wasn't he? He was the physics professor, too, wasn't he?
I believe so. Don't quote me on that. But he definitely talked about how expert he was at stoking a fire. The dean was on a hard sell. Stephen is one of the brightest minds, one of the most eclectic memories, and one of the most creative people they have ever had pass through the school, it seems at this point, isn't he?
Okay.
And he wants him. So, hey, Stevie, come here while I prod this fire and I grow it into just a smoldering flame. Don't you want to be a part of this? I mean, look how good I am at this fire thing. Have you ever done this?
Okay.
No, I don't think I'd be... What does he say? He ends the conversation with, I don't think I'd be very good at building fires, or something close to that. I am sure I could not light a fire. That's how he ends the scene. This book is a master course on how to make environment mirror the individual.
Okay.
Right down to that diary at the end.
Because there's good writing.
Right down to those diary entries at the end. That journaling that he does right there at the end. And why? Because what is a journal?
It's an intrinsic writing exercise. It's the written word, but it is the interior thought.
It is a practice of the self with the self.
Okay.
Where is Stephen going?
To find himself.
To be himself.
To be himself.
He's got to at this point.
Okay.
He's basically being kicked out of home.
Okay, and that is also it's the first opportunity where the style of narration changes, where we're not in this bizarre stream of conscious James Joyce just going all over the place. It's the first time we see hard Stephen writing. about Stephen, what's actually going on. So it is an interesting change of pace, and it's only a few pages, unfortunately, but it is an interesting change of pace.
How so is it a change of pace?
So, again, we were talking about, this is a master's course for the writer. We have an entire novel here where the narration is coming directly from the stream of conscious mind of the character we're talking about.
That's one of the things I want to hit next week.
You want to go on that next week?
Yes, because I think that it is something worth discussing in a review format about the text.
Fair. It is overarching. But okay, so next week on Strip Code Lit, we'll talk about this. Forget my argument for today. We do get to see Stephen developing a little bit more as a writer this time. He turns back to writing for the first time. He's terrible at it, and that's good, though. That is the developing phase of the artist. When you finally sit down and say you want to do this, you're gonna suck. That's the way it works. Nobody sits down and becomes Stephen King, except Stephen King. So you have to sit down.
Why did you use Stephen King?
Because Stephen King sat down, he's like, oh, I'm gonna write a book, and he's like, oh, I don't think it's good. Boom, Carrie. And then let's just publish every single year after that. That's fine.
You populist.
I know. Anyway, we do get to see the developing artist. Finally, we get that where he's turning to art. He's trying to tackle this idea of what is beauty, and he's starting to finally write.
Did you enjoy that part?
It was okay.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah. What is your major in?
Literature.
166. One moment now, Mr. Daedalus, and you will see. There is an art in lighting a fire. We have the liberal arts, and we have the useful arts. This is one of the useful arts. Too bad you went without lit degree, isn't it, Dalton?
That's a good quote from a physics professor. Like, if I go into the physics part of any university, they better have that hanging up somewhere.
If I go to a physics professor and I don't hear that, I'm a little upset.
That's fair.
I'm incensed.
Okay.
You should have talked down my degree, sir. Ma'am.
You are correct, though. At this point, we do have a character here who has turned against God. He is, at this point, I would say an atheist. However, you get a very agnostic feel. At one point, he's even questioning. He's like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. But I got to go figure it out for myself.
And see, that plays into the sticky nature of agnosticism, quote unquote, versus atheism.
Okay.
I'm as hardcore atheist as it gets. If you ask me if there's a God, I'll say, I don't know.
Okay, that's fair.
Then why don't you have religious beliefs? In who? Right? So that's where like agnosticism and atheism sort of split apart. But it is very. These are the beginnings, which are this is probably the beginning of atheism in a character, which is a very murky ground.
Okay.
Can I ask you this on camera?
Sure.
For our review, would you be comfortable in maybe a post-credits talking about your relationship with religion?
Sure.
Okay. So I think we're going to have a skit for the review. We're going to have the review. I'm working on having a guest for the review. And then post-credit, we will both have our stories with religion. So we'll have a grandiose sort of video there as
17 hours worth of Portrait of the Artist as a young man.
You have to suffer because we had to suffer.
It is a difficult read. Don't get me wrong on that. Again, we're kind of getting into an overarching review, but like this is a difficult text. So if you've made it through with us at this point, whether you enjoyed or not, congratulations. I mean, this is work.
If you've made it this far, congratulations. Even if you've just made it this far watching our ham-fisted videos, congratulations.
Work. Well done.
Did you have anything else to talk about?
Yeah, but carry on.
We're done.
We're done? No, we're just done with this too.
Go on. No.
Okay, so we get the idea of, and unfortunately I don't know much about this Jesuit religious movement. I'm assuming this is not Irish-born, excuse me. This seems to be a something that has entered Ireland. Because we get the idea of not only this Jesuit religion being the thing, and this idea of this new political nationalism, basically, in Ireland, and all these changes that are happening to Ireland. And right at the end, we start getting a lot of weird, Irish pride coming from Stephen. He is an Irishman. But in order to discover what that means to him, he's got to leave Ireland. It's no longer there for him. His country has betrayed him. So in order to kindle that fire within him, he has to leave. And that's a great thing. Sometimes you have to step away from your environment. You have to be uncomfortable and you have to go see something else in order to be able to take everything in and to make sense of what's going on. So I think there's some good stuff going on there. A lot of good stuff going on. There's tons of fucking layers to this book. It's just where you start unraveling them and how deep you go.
I think one of the things that is worth looking at are the literary references.
Okay.
Do you remember any of the literary references?
Not off the top of my head, no.
All sorts of literary references. This book has literary references every other page.
And this particular chapter is even when Stephen's turning more towards literature as his go-to.
Yeah. And we want to be an authentic Irish voice. So the weird part is both of these sides, Protestantism and Catholicism, are going to claim to be authentic Irish voices.
Okay.
Because everyone sees themselves as Irish. Does that make sense? The only way to appeal to a major mindset for a person is to wriggle your way into another mindset of that person. This is one of those times where this was right in the age, if I'm not mistaken, where, so if you went back to the 1500s and you went up to somebody on the street and said, "What are you?" They'd say Christian.
Okay.
Right? If you went up to someone on the street today and said, if you went out to that street and said, "What are you?" the first answer is going to be American, right? So nationalism is people's predominant mindset today. If you ask someone to identify, their nationality is going to be, okay, I am American, I am Missourian, I am, I don't know after that, Christian, I am white, I am middle class. So there's boom, boom, boom. That's how these things go, right? So it used to be, you ask any random person what they are, religion's going to be here.
Okay.
So this is sort of the time where
There was a shift.
nationality and religion, they're toggling for that top spot. So if you want to convince someone that they are Protestant, well, isn't the best way to be an Irishman, to be Protestant? Isn't the best way to be a Catholic? To be an Irishman, to be Catholic?
Okay.
Right? So you're going to appeal to whatever the secondary idea is, which will let you get your big idea over.
And religion does play a huge hand in Irish culture. So that is a big thing for sure. And unfortunately, like I said before, I don't have a grand education on the history of Ireland.
Right.
I grew up with an American history education, which means we fucking left those goddamn Brits, and here we are. That's it. It all started 1700s.
We left the Brits and the Irish were around.
They were there-ish. But no, I think that would help definitely to tackle this text, is to have a little background knowledge of what's going on with this. Because you are correct. It is a changing time for Ireland.
I think that it definitely, so this is definitely, and I think I mentioned this in the first episode of this series, that's another part where Joyce is playing with the environment and how it influences the individual.
Okay.
Ultimately, this text, I believe, is an argument for individuality. Because that's what artists are. Artists are, barring anything else, artists are an argument for the individual. Can you make another case?
I think you're good there, and I do agree with you with that. And I think it's so much to say at this point, with all the trouble with religion, going back and forth on the two extremes. At this point, Stephen is becoming more comfortable with his individuality, and art is becoming his religion, which is a beautiful thing. That is very well done. I think you're making, if you're still on the same point we were talking about, I don't know if you were transitioning, but I think that the only part you certainly having a deeper depth of knowledge about this conflict than either of us has would add to your experience. Mm-hmm. I think that all you really have to understand is that there's a war going on. Okay.
Right? As long as you understand that, you get the premise.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong, knowing more will help you, I think. But is that where you were going?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it would be more beneficial to have a little bit more knowledge about what's going on with this, because that seems to be a huge theme of this last chapter. But, you are correct. We know what's going on, and we're looking at the text from a standalone. If we just pick it up and read it, no matter who you are.
Yeah.
Fair. What would you like to talk about?
On 182, page numbers don't really matter in this because we've both got such different texts, and everyone probably will with this one because there's so many printings, but we get this quote. "The soul is born," he said vaguely, "first in those moments I told you of. It has a slow and dark birth, more mysterious than the birth of the body. When the soul of a man is born in this country, there are nets flung at it to hold it back from flight. You talk to me of nationality, language, religion. I shall try to fly by those nets." That is an argument for individuality.
Very dataless.
Very, very dataless. It is an argument that is very pro-individual, right? So I think that's where we're going here.
Okay. And this entire thing, and even with the fucking title, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, we could definitely argue from the beginning this has been about Stephen's individuality, Stephen finding out who he is.
It is not the portrait of a Catholic Irishman.
No.
As a young man. It is not the portrait of a Protestant Irishman as a young man.
And I think that's something that really does define the great artist. It's the person who's willing to identify as an individual, to look at things differently, to approach things differently. That's where you get real beauty. That's where it comes from. There's your fucking answer, Stephen. I don't know why it took you so long to figure out what beauty is, but there's your answer.
It's not really that long. This is not a huge text.
No, it's not. How many pages do you have on this? Because I think I'm like 180.
I have 200 pages.
Okay, well, I'm definitely wrong. Oh, it keeps
180 to 200 is not that big a difference.
Fair.
Different margins and things. There is a massive callback to Chapter 1. Did you catch it?
Are we talking about the back to the poetry again, where he's starting to write for the first time, and we're looking back towards Emma, her name is? No. Carry on.
"Do you know what Ireland is?" asked Stephen with a cold violence. "Ireland is the old sow that eats her farrow. Once upon a time, and a very good time it was, there was a moo cow coming along the road, and this moo cow that was coming along the road met a nice'ns little boy named Baby Taku."
Okay. We do get a lot of throwbacks throughout this chapter here. We get to revisit the idea of the university, revisit the idea of the Jesuit priests. We revisit the idea of EC, who we have found out at this point is, of course, Emma, for sure. Stephen's love interest throughout this, a throwback to the cows. So yeah, a good thing Joyce has done here is he's wrapping everything up. He's tying up all these loose ends while still leaving all these open questions, all these layers that you can pick at if you want to go that route. Because I think this does have an amazing ability that whatever route you want to take, you can find something. You want to talk politics, religion, art, mythology, whatever you want, there's a layer in here for you. But man, is it overwhelming as an overall.
It's a very difficult text. It was for me. There will be individuals who breeze through this and say they understand everything immediately, and maybe they're not lying. Certainly that is possible. But to my readership, this is still very difficult.
It's a hard text. It is.
This is a text that I failed in college. This is a text that I have not gone back to since. It's a text that I have held dearly to me because it is dear to so many that I figured someday. And I definitely have a better appreciation for it now than I did.
Okay. And I think that's a huge, important thing with text like this is the level of appreciation. You have to try to, even if you don't enjoy it, I certainly didn't enjoy it, you have to be able to find the ways to appreciate it. The ways to say, hey, I understand why this contributed to the overarching scheme of literature. I understand why people say this is a great text. I just don't fucking like it.
You didn't like it at all?
It has its moments. It's not bad by any means, but it's not great.
Not at all?
It's just,
Okay.
Like it's no Harry Potter.
Well, I'd like to move on.
Okay. Where are we moving on to?
I think in the first and third episode of it doesn't matter we've talked definitely that it is outside influences of change that can definitely mold an artist, right? We talked about Shakespeare.
Okay.
Living through something very similar to this and having to write about it very coyly. We talked about Langston Hughes, who lived through monumental change in the United States, and those outside pressures funneled through him. And it's still a shame to me that Langston Hughes didn't live at a time where he could have written about anything he wanted and had to focus so much on the things he focused on, because I think that guy could have written so much stuff. But this is obviously the Irish sort of revolution that focused through Joyce, right?
Okay.
And we talked about, in our time, what is that? And we talked, well, eventually it's going to be AI, right?
Okay.
It's going to cause massive social, political disruption. We get this on 189, well, on my 189. In order to see that basket, said Stephen, your mind, first of all, separates the basket from the rest of the visible universe, which is not the basket. The first phase of apprehension is a bounding line drawn about the object to be apprehended. An aesthetic image is presented to us either in space or time. What is audible is presented in time. What is visible is presented in space. But temporal or spatial, the aesthetic image is first luminously apprehended and self-bounded and self-contained upon the immeasurable background of space or time, which it is not. You apprehended it as one thing, you see it as another. As a whole, you apprehended it as one thing, you see it as a whole. You apprehended its wholeness. That is integritus. That is one of the problems that engineers are having with AI.
Okay.
That's why it's just and this is not something that has to be drawn from the text. It's not something that is immediately relatable to the text, but it's just interesting to me that it pops up in this way in this text, because that's the next major social disruption we're going to have to deal with. And one of the problems that they're having with making AI autonomous is the fact that if I want an AI robot to pick up that shoe, there's no way to really tell it that based on it. There's no grid.
You can't just
for
say
it.
pick up the shoe.
Right. Now they are solving that. I don't fully understand that problem with AI, but it's the reason why even those advanced robots, have you seen the robot that picks up the box and the guy knocks it out of his hand and kicks the robot, things like that? Have you seen that video?
Yes.
Hopefully everyone's seen it. Pay close attention to the box. There's a barcode on the box.
Okay.
So they have to say, pick up this barcode. And the robot is able to then say, okay, the barcode's on that thing, we pick that up.
The robot doesn't understand it. It's a box. It's okay.
And this is a major problem with AI that I think was discovered in the 80s, and I don't know how they're solving it or how to exactly word the problem. But it's very interesting, and you should check it out as well. But it was just striking to me that is in this text.
Okay. So I think where Joyce was most successful was this was written very much right time, right place. Because we read this inadvertently as a historical text.
Right.
However, this popped out right before World War I, if not right during the beginnings of World War I. Look at your dates.
Was it?
I believe 1914 should be your publishing date.
Okay, well, carry on.
So this is a period of time where our world we're going to war. The first big one, man. Your country's forsaken you. Your God's forsaken you. All that's left's the man. And the man's got to find his own place. And we do get this idea, again, with all the Hemingway we read, all the Fitzgerald. Once this war was over, we had a bunch of lost men trying to find themselves again. This idea of going out and finding what it means to be you, what it means to be an Irishman. So Joyce really hit the nail on the head with this one. Publishing this right before World War I really kicked off, and throwing this question out there that the next generation of writers was going to be struggling with. So I think that's where he gets his success with this. At the time, this would have been striking. The idea of turning against God, the idea of finding oneself and leaving the country to find yourself somewhere else. That is what the 1920s and 30s were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, God damn it. He got one finally. We're fucking done now. I got one.
No, we're not. So it's also William Faulkner, I believe, in his Nobel Prize Award speech, said that the reason writing sucks today, and this was in the 50s, I think, is everybody has to worry about, I might pen this sentence and then be blown up. And I'm not quoting him, obviously, but that's the big worry today. You might be blown up tomorrow.
Okay.
And because of this, everyone is so preoccupied with what's going on right now that they can't write the timeless. They can't write the story of one individual doing one individual's act, which transcends whatever's going on at the time and will live forever. People can't do that anymore.
Okay.
This novel is a great example of how to do both. But to do both, it seems you almost have to forsake that. To do both has to be forsaking the former. You have to, the former. You have to forsake the big idea right now. Your character has to say, to hell with that big idea.
Okay.
And that's what becomes timeless.
It's a difficult task.
Yeah.
It is. It is. Adrian, you want to wrap this up here? I feel like we are running out of time, so we need to move on for next week.
If you like this sort of thing, if you like to tackle the classics, if you like to tackle big books, if you like to tackle difficult books, we hope that you hit subscribe, we hope that you hit the like button, and we hope to see you back next week.
Yeah, I know. Gotta get comfortable. I'm going to be here for 20 minutes.